Rome had won so many wars that defeat no longer seemed possible. Every victory had strengthened the belief that the Roman Republic was protected by discipline, courage, and destiny itself. Across Italy, people spoke of Roman armies as if they were unstoppable forces of nature. Kingdoms had fallen before them. Cities had surrendered without resistance. Enemies who once dreamed of challenging Rome now feared even the sight of its crimson standards appearing on the horizon. To millions of people, victory was no longer a question. It was simply what Rome did. But history has a cruel way of punishing those who mistake confidence for invincibility. There are battles that change borders, battles that change kings, and battles that change entire civilizations. Then there are battles so devastating that military commanders continue studying them more than 2,000 years later. One battle became the perfect example of how a brilliant strategy can destroy an army that should have won with ease. It was a battle where numbers meant nothing, courage was not enough, and confidence became the greatest weakness of all. It was the Battle of Cannae, a day that proved even the strongest empire could be brought to its knees by one extraordinary commander. Long before Roman soldiers marched toward Cannae, another story had already begun across the Mediterranean Sea. In North Africa stood the wealthy city of Carthage, Rome's greatest rival. Carthage controlled valuable trade routes, possessed enormous wealth, and commanded one of the finest navies in the ancient world. For decades, these two powers fought fiercely for control of the Western Mediterranean. Their rivalry grew into a series of brutal conflicts known as the Punic Wars, where every victory only deepened the hatred between them. Among the noble families of Carthage was a young boy named Hannibal Barca. According to ancient historians, when he was still a child, his father brought him before the gods and made him swear an oath that would shape the rest of his life. Hannibal placed his hand upon the sacred altar and promised that he would remain an enemy of Rome for as long as he lived. It was not the promise of an angry child. It became the mission that defined one of history's greatest military commanders. As Hannibal grew older, he mastered the art of warfare faster than almost anyone around him. He studied different cultures, learned how armies moved, understood the strengths and weaknesses of cavalry, and inspired absolute loyalty from the soldiers who followed him. He knew that defeating Rome would require far more than bravery. Rome possessed greater resources, larger armies, and a population capable of replacing almost every loss. If Carthage hoped to survive, Hannibal would have to defeat Rome with intelligence instead of numbers. When the Second Punic War began, Hannibal made a decision that shocked both his allies and his enemies. Instead of attacking Rome by sea, where Roman naval power could stop him, he chose one of the most dangerous military routes imaginable. He gathered tens of thousands of soldiers, thousands of horses, and dozens of war elephants before leading them across the towering Alps during winter. Snow buried the mountain paths, freezing winds battered the army, and steep cliffs claimed countless lives. Many believed the journey itself would destroy his force before reaching Italy. Yet Hannibal accomplished what almost everyone believed impossible. After crossing the Alps, he entered northern Italy with an army that had survived conditions no military commander would willingly accept. Although he had lost many men during the crossing, those who remained had become battle-hardened veterans. They trusted Hannibal completely because they had already survived what should have killed them. Rome suddenly faced an enemy who had appeared where nobody expected him. The Roman Senate reacted quickly. Confident in its military strength, Rome assembled powerful armies to stop the invasion before it could spread. Roman commanders believed Hannibal's exhausted soldiers would collapse once they faced the disciplined legions of the Republic. Instead, Hannibal defeated Roman forces again and again. At the Battle of the Trebia, clever planning turned Roman confidence into disaster. At Lake Trasimene, Hannibal executed one of history's greatest ambushes, trapping an entire Roman army between steep hills and the water's edge. Thousands of Roman soldiers died before they fully understood what had happened. Each defeat sent shockwaves through Rome. Citizens who had always believed their armies were unbeatable now watched survivor after survivor return home with horrifying stories. Yet instead of becoming cautious, many Roman leaders grew even more determined to crush Hannibal once and for all. They believed the problem was not Rome itself, but the commanders leading its armies. If enough soldiers could be gathered under determined leadership, victory would surely return. Rome still possessed something Carthage could never match: population. Every defeat cost Rome thousands of lives, yet the Republic continued raising new armies from across Italy. Farms, towns, and allied cities supplied fresh recruits in astonishing numbers. Roman leaders believed no enemy could destroy an empire capable of replacing entire armies again and again. If Hannibal wanted victory, he would eventually face a force too large to defeat. By the summer of 216 BC, Rome decided to end the war in one decisive battle. The Senate gathered one of the largest armies the Republic had ever fielded. Nearly 80,000 infantry and thousands of cavalry assembled to confront Hannibal near the small village of Cannae in southern Italy. It was an overwhelming display of military power. Roman citizens celebrated as soldiers marched through the countryside, convinced that Hannibal's long campaign was finally coming to an end. Across the open plains of Cannae, Hannibal carefully observed the approaching Roman army. He understood exactly what Rome intended to do. The Romans believed that overwhelming numbers alone would guarantee victory. They expected to crush his smaller army through sheer force and relentless pressure. Many commanders would have retreated after seeing such an enormous enemy force. Hannibal did the opposite. He smiled because the massive Roman army was behaving exactly as he hoped. His officers gathered around him as they studied the battlefield. Flat open ground stretched across the plain, with only gentle rises and the nearby Aufidus River shaping the landscape. To most commanders, it appeared to favor the larger Roman army. Hannibal saw something entirely different. Every detail of the terrain, every movement of the Roman formations, and every decision made by their commanders confirmed that the trap he had imagined for months was about to become reality. On the opposite side of the battlefield, Roman commanders looked across Hannibal's lines with complete confidence. Their soldiers outnumbered the Carthaginians by tens of thousands. Veteran legionaries tightened their armor, lifted heavy shields, and prepared for the battle that everyone believed would restore Rome's honor. Few noticed that Hannibal was quietly arranging his men in a formation unlike anything the Roman army had ever faced. What appeared to be a weakness at the center of his line was actually the beginning of one of the greatest military deceptions in human history. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains of Cannae, casting long shadows across one of the largest armies Rome had ever assembled. Nearly 80,000 Roman infantry stood shoulder to shoulder, their shields locked together in massive formations that stretched across the battlefield. Thousands of cavalry waited on both wings, while crimson banners fluttered proudly in the warm summer wind. To every Roman soldier, the outcome seemed obvious. They outnumbered Hannibal's army by tens of thousands. They believed this battle would not become another desperate struggle. It would become the day Rome finally destroyed its greatest enemy. Across the field, Hannibal quietly observed every movement. His army was smaller, composed of soldiers from many different lands, including Africans, Iberians, Gauls, and Numidians. They spoke different languages and carried different weapons, yet years of fighting together had transformed them into one disciplined force. Hannibal knew every commander by name. More importantly, every soldier trusted him completely. They had crossed mountains together, survived impossible battles together, and defeated Rome again and again. They no longer questioned his decisions because experience had taught them that his plans always hid something the enemy could not see. Instead of arranging his troops in a straight defensive line, Hannibal created a formation unlike anything Rome expected. He placed his less experienced infantry at the center and positioned his strongest African veterans on both sides. The center gently curved outward toward the Roman army, almost appearing weak and exposed. From a distance, it looked as though Hannibal had made a serious mistake. Roman commanders immediately noticed what seemed to be the weakest point in the enemy formation. That was exactly what Hannibal wanted them to believe. The Roman plan was simple. Their enormous infantry force would smash directly through the center of Hannibal's line using overwhelming numbers. Once the enemy center collapsed, the rest of the Carthaginian army would panic and flee. Rome had used brute force successfully for generations, and their commanders saw no reason to change a strategy that had brought them countless victories before. Confidence spread rapidly through the Roman ranks as officers shouted final orders and soldiers prepared to advance. Before the infantry even collided, the battle began on the wings. Roman cavalry charged forward, hoping to drive Hannibal's horsemen away and secure the flanks. But Hannibal had entrusted his cavalry to experienced commanders who understood speed, discipline, and timing. A fierce clash erupted as horses thundered across the dusty plain. Spears shattered, swords flashed beneath the bright sun, and clouds of dust quickly swallowed the battlefield. Within a surprisingly short time, Hannibal's cavalry overwhelmed the Roman horsemen. Forcing many to flee, while others were cut down where they stood. Most Roman soldiers fighting in the center never realized what had happened behind them. The Roman infantry continued pushing forward exactly as planned. Tens of thousands of heavily armed legionaries marched together like an unstoppable wall of iron. Every step drove Hannibal's center backward. Roman commanders watched with satisfaction as the enemy line slowly retreated. To them, the battle was unfolding perfectly. The Carthaginian center appeared unable to withstand the enormous pressure created by Rome's superior numbers. What the Romans failed to understand was that Hannibal's retreat had never been caused by fear. Every step backward had been planned before the battle even began. Hannibal personally directed the gradual withdrawal of his central troops. Instead of collapsing into disorder, they retreated with remarkable discipline, slowly bending inward while continuing to resist Roman attacks. As the Roman infantry pressed deeper into the enemy formation, they unknowingly entered the exact position Hannibal wanted them to occupy. Their own success blinded them to the growing danger surrounding them. The curved line that had once bulged outward slowly transformed into a deep pocket. Roman soldiers became increasingly crowded together as more and more troops pushed from behind, believing they were moments away from total victory. Thousands of men found themselves packed so tightly that raising a sword or shield became difficult. Communication between officers almost disappeared beneath the noise of battle. Dust filled the air, reducing visibility while confusion spread across the massive formation. Then Hannibal gave the signal. His veteran African infantry, who had remained untouched on both flanks, suddenly turned inward with perfect discipline. These experienced soldiers slammed directly into the exposed sides of the Roman army. The legionaries who had spent the entire battle pushing forward suddenly found enemies attacking from both directions. The Roman formation that had looked so powerful only moments earlier instantly became a trap. Panic began spreading through the crowded ranks. Roman officers desperately shouted commands, trying to reorganize their men, but there was almost no room to maneuver. Soldiers trapped near the center could barely move. Those at the front continued pushing forward without realizing they were being surrounded. Those behind them could not see the danger developing ahead. The enormous size of Rome's army, once considered its greatest advantage, had become its greatest weakness. At that exact moment, another disaster struck. After defeating the Roman cavalry, Hannibal's horsemen raced back across the battlefield. Instead of chasing fleeing enemies, they attacked the Roman army from behind. The legionaries suddenly found themselves surrounded on every side. Enemy infantry blocked both flanks. Hannibal's center prevented escape forward. Cavalry sealed every path behind them. The trap was complete. For perhaps the first time in Roman history, an entire army realized there was nowhere left to run. Inside the encirclement, the battlefield became unimaginable. Thousands of soldiers struggled for space while arrows, spears, and swords struck from every direction. The tightly packed Roman formation prevented organized resistance. Men could not swing their weapons freely. Many died without ever seeing the enemy who struck them. Others were crushed beneath the weight of frightened soldiers desperately trying to escape the tightening ring surrounding them. Hannibal remained remarkably calm as he watched his masterpiece unfold. Every movement of his army occurred exactly as he had imagined before sunrise. Years of preparation, countless victories, and a deep understanding of Roman psychology had all led to this single moment. He had not defeated Rome through greater numbers or stronger weapons. He had defeated them by making their greatest strength work against them. The Roman commanders finally understood the terrible truth. The battle they believed they had already won had been lost from the very beginning. The Roman army had become a prison of its own making. Tens of thousands of soldiers who had marched confidently into battle only hours earlier now found themselves trapped inside a shrinking circle of death. Everywhere they turned, enemy warriors closed in with relentless discipline. The dust that had once hidden Hannibal's movements now blinded Roman officers, trying desperately to understand what had happened. Commands disappeared beneath the screams of wounded soldiers, the clash of steel, and the thunder of horses charging through the chaos. For the first time in generations, Rome's greatest army could neither advance nor retreat. Inside the encirclement, survival became almost impossible. Roman legionaries stood packed so tightly together that many could barely lift their shields. Some struggled simply to breathe as thousands of frightened men pushed against one another, desperately searching for any path to escape. Those standing near the center could not even see the battlefield around them. They only heard the horrifying sounds of battle drawing closer with every passing minute. The walls of steel surrounding them continued closing like a giant trap that no human strength could break. Hannibal understood something that few commanders in history had fully mastered. Victory was not achieved by destroying an enemy's courage alone. It was achieved by destroying every possible option available to that enemy. The Romans were brave. They were experienced. Many had survived previous battles, but courage meant nothing when there was no room to fight and nowhere left to run. Hannibal had transformed the battlefield itself into his greatest weapon. His African veteran infantry continued tightening the circle with incredible discipline. Unlike the exhausted Roman soldiers trapped inside, Hannibal's troops maintained their formations with remarkable precision. Every step forward reduced the Romans' ability to resist. Cavalry repeatedly struck any group attempting to break through the encirclement. Every failed escape only increased panic among those still trapped inside. As the hours passed, the battlefield turned into one of the greatest military disasters the ancient world had ever witnessed. Ancient historians describe thousands of Roman soldiers dying where they stood because the overcrowded formations prevented any organized defense. Others collapsed from exhaustion beneath the unbearable heat of the Italian summer. The enormous Roman army, once considered unbeatable because of its size, had become so crowded that it could no longer use the discipline that had made it famous for centuries. Roman commanders fought desperately to restore order, but leadership itself was collapsing. Consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus was mortally wounded during the fighting while trying to rally his men. Officers disappeared one after another as the circle continued tightening. Without clear leadership, confusion spread even faster through the trapped army. Small groups of soldiers fought bravely until the very end, refusing to surrender despite knowing escape had become impossible. Their courage could not change the outcome. The battle had already been decided by strategy long before swords ever crossed. By late afternoon, the plains of Cannae were covered with broken shields, shattered spears, fallen standards, and thousands upon thousands of Roman bodies. The scale of destruction shocked even those who had witnessed countless battles before. Historians still debate the exact numbers, but many estimate that between 50,000 and 70,000 Roman soldiers died in a single day. Tens of thousands more were captured. Entire noble families lost fathers, sons, and brothers within only a few hours. Never before had Rome suffered such overwhelming losses in one battle. News of the disaster spread toward Rome with terrifying speed. Messengers arrived carrying reports so unbelievable that many citizens refused to accept them as true. Entire legions had vanished. Senior commanders were dead. The Republic's greatest army had simply ceased to exist. Panic filled the streets as families searched desperately for information about loved ones who would never return. The confidence that had defined Rome for generations suddenly disappeared, replaced by fear unlike anything the Republic had experienced before. Many believed Hannibal would immediately march on Rome itself. The road to the capital appeared open. Few armies remained capable of stopping him. Across Italy, allies questioned whether Rome could survive at all. Some cities abandoned their loyalty to the Republic and joined Hannibal's side, convinced that Roman power had finally come to an end. For a brief moment, it seemed entirely possible that one brilliant battle had changed the course of history forever. Yet something remarkable happened. Despite losing one of the greatest armies ever assembled, Rome refused to surrender. Instead of negotiating peace, the Roman Senate rejected despair. New armies were raised almost immediately. Boys too young to fight, elderly citizens, and even slaves were recruited to replace the unimaginable losses suffered at Cannae. Rome abandoned reckless offensives and adopted a far more cautious strategy, refusing to give Hannibal another opportunity to destroy a massive army in open battle. The Republic accepted temporary humiliation because survival had become more important than pride. Hannibal had achieved one of the greatest tactical victories in military history, but even his brilliance could not completely destroy Rome's extraordinary ability to recover. Years later, the war would eventually shift against Carthage, ending with Rome victorious. Yet victory in the wider war never erased the memory of Cannae. The battle remained permanently engraved into Roman history as the day confidence nearly destroyed an empire. More than 2,000 years later, military academies across the world still study Hannibal's masterpiece. Officers analyze every movement of his army, every decision he made, and every mistake committed by the Roman commanders. The double envelopment executed at Cannae is still considered one of the greatest battlefield maneuvers ever performed. Generals from Napoleon to modern military strategists have admired its brilliance because it demonstrates a timeless truth about warfare. Superior numbers alone never guarantee victory. Intelligence, preparation, patience, and understanding the enemy often matter far more than the size of an army. The Battle of Cannae was never supposed to end this way. Rome possessed more soldiers, greater resources, and overwhelming confidence. By every conventional measure, it should have been Hannibal who faced destruction on that battlefield. Instead, one extraordinary commander turned the greatest advantage of the Roman army into the very reason for its defeat. That is why Cannae is remembered not simply as a battle, but as a lesson that has survived for over 2 millennia. History rarely rewards those who believe they cannot lose. Every great power eventually reaches a moment when confidence begins replacing caution, when past victories create dangerous overconfidence, and when leaders assume that strength alone guarantees success. Cannae reminds us that the greatest defeats often begin long before the first sword is drawn. They begin the moment an opponent is underestimated. On a quiet summer day in 216 BC, Rome marched toward what it believed would be another glorious victory. Instead, it walked directly into one of the greatest military traps ever created, proving forever that the battle which should have never been lost became one of history's most unforgettable defeats.